Day.
And I'm Richard Day.
We're both chiropractors.
We've been in practice together for 11 years.
Married for 10.
With 3 beautiful little girls.
We know it's possible to have an exceptional practice that's built around your life.
Because we've done it.
So we've created this podcast,
the Lifestyle Practice Builders Podcast.
We'll interview chiropractors, answer questions, and bring you resources to help build and grow your practice.
So let's get this party started.
Welcome back to Lifestyle Practice Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Haley Day, and today's guest is Zach Geist. Zach founded Student Loan Tutor in 2015, and as one of the leading experts in federal student loan repayment, he and his team have taught thousands of student loan borrowers all over the country how to save enormous amounts of money and hassle. He currently resides on the Hamakua coast of Big Island, Hawaii. Student loans are a huge stressor for many students and new docs. Rich and I know exactly what it's like because we came out of school with double the loans as many of you are going to as well. At the same time, you're going to want to be starting a business, buying a home, starting a family, and also begin building a retirement. So these are all things Rich and I have done by being smart about our student loans. And so we want to help you hopefully find some tips today and maybe get the support of Zach and Student Loan Tour to make some of these choices for yourselves. So we know at times it can seem impossible, but we did it. And we know that with the right support, you can too. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by us, the Lifestyle Practice Builders Podcast. If this is your first episode, then welcome to the family. We are in our 6th year of doing the podcast and almost about to reach our 200th episode. Please subscribe and share the podcast so we can help more chiropractors be successful in practice. Also, visit our website, lifestylepracticebuilders.com, to learn more about the resources we've created to help you do better, including our most recent course for students, the Smart Start Career Planning Workshop. More information for chiropractic students at lifestylepracticebuilders.com/start. We appreciate you all. And now for today's episode. Hey, Zach, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We appreciate your time.
Yes. Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to be here. It's early over here in Hawaii.
Yes, and a lot warmer than it is where I am.
It is really warm. It hasn't rained in a couple weeks, which is unique for here.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to let you start by kind of diving deep on who you are and the company that you've started and let you kind of give us some details.
Great. Yeah, my name is Zach Geist. I'm the founder of a company called Student Loan Tutor. And I know that most of your listeners are chiropractors or about to become chiropractors. And I know chiropractors quite well. Out of any one profession, chiropractors are probably our number one client. We have over 1,000 chiropractic clients that we help manage their student loans. And that's kind of confusing for a lot of people that you would want someone to manage your student loans or manage your debt. However, when you're looking at something where there's hundreds of thousands of dollars, it makes a world of difference on your overall financial picture. So that's what we do. We have a team of people. There's 17 of us. It's grown over the years, and it started with helping people with managing their student debt. Then it's expanded into helping people set up their tax strategy for their corporation, helping them with insurance, helping them with investments and saving and retirement. So we became more of a holistic finance over the years. And we've been doing this since 2014 and officially since 2015. And we've helped thousands of people all over the U.S.
Okay. And can you tell us how you help them? Like, what's that process look like?
Yeah, great question. And it's a fair question because we're talking about student loans. And generally when you're talking about a loan, it's pretty cut and dry. You borrow money and then you pay it back. And you pay it back based on what your interest rate is and what your terms are and how much you borrowed. And generally you put those numbers together and it's pretty simple. You don't need someone like me or someone on my team in order to be able to pay it back. However, with student loans, it doesn't work like that. It's almost a difference between particle physics and quantum physics, so to speak, where student loans, you can, it's kind of like one of those choose your own adventure stories. And if you have a ton of money coming in and it makes financial sense, or you just want to pay back the loan, you can, and you could do that in the traditional way. And there's actually a bunch of different ways to do that. There's actually currently 9 different ways to repay federal student loan. Private student loans are completely different, and they have a whole new different set of rules. So what I do is I help people navigate the federal student loan repayment system, very similar to how a CPA or tax advisor would help someone navigate the tax system with the goal of paying as little tax as is legally required. So we do that with student loans. And the effect, the outcome for people often brings them to tears. They get on the phone with us, and afterwards they realize, there's a moment where they realize they've probably been overpaying, or they've been racking up huge interest fees that they wouldn't normally have to. So there's this mixture of, oh my gosh, I've kind of screwed up, but thankfully I know. But it generally is the difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of the loan by navigating it correctly. So to answer your question, we teach them for them specifically by pulling up their loans on the Federal Servicer website, showing them exactly what they're looking at. What do these interest rates mean? How does income-driven repayment work? How does the interest accrue? What the heck is loan forgiveness? Does it actually exist? What does it mean? Is there a tax implication? Is there some taxes I have to pay because I have loan forgiveness? How does this all work? How do I document my income? So we explain how all of that works, what they're going to end up paying. We do some forecasting based on what's going to happen with their income and family size and what programs they qualify for, how much they're going to pay per month, how much they're going to pay per year, how much they're going to pay over the life of the loan, how much interest they're going to accrue, how much loans are going to get forgiven at the end of term if the projection goes the way it is, and what taxes would be owed. And then how do we prepare for that whole thing? And then that's where the whole thing became holistic finance, because there's so much that goes into just preparing for the student loans that you have to handle other aspects as well. So it's often, I jokingly say, it's like a financial initiation for people. The student loan creates the urgency or the pain to take some action and take some planning. And then when that happens, so many other areas of people's finances get handled. And it removes so much of this ambiguity, and it creates, where you could focus on your practice as opposed to worrying about money all the time. And we do the paperwork too. Haley.
Oh, nice.
So not only do we explain it all, we deal with the nightmare of contacting servicers. And servicers, as crazy as it sounds, it's unbelievable. If it was any person with any job anywhere, servicers have a 61% error rate. So if you submit everything correctly, there's a 61% chance they're going to screw it up. And the fact is, nobody really does checks and balances. You used to balance your checkbook because you wanted to make sure, not only that you knew how much money you had, but that the bank didn't screw up. But people don't even know that they have to do that with their student loans. Like the thought, I'm going to repeat that again, 61% chance that they're going to screw up every single time they do it. And you're doing this sometimes multiple times a year, at least once a year. So the chances statistically that they're going to screw up becomes almost 100% over the life of your loan. And by almost 100%, I mean like 99.9 something percent that they're going to screw up. They're going to screw up. So knowing how to handle that, or in our case, we handle that for our clients.
Yeah, so I think we were talking about before it jumped on is that there's just so many new things coming when you graduate from school. And so it sounds like you kind of come in and you are walking through all of those things with them and giving them a plan. We talk a lot about the school gives you a plan when you're in school. You're in try 1, you're in try 2, you're in try 3. And then when you graduate, it's kind of up to you to make a plan. And so it's nice that you guys can come in and give that support through those different areas. You have a team of 17 people, so somebody might want to know, like, this isn't all chiropractors, right? On your team?
No, no, on our team that work there. No, it's not. There's actually no chiropractors that work with us. It's interesting that we would need so many people to manage student loans. And I totally understand the situation of not being prepared at all for what many people call the real world. I don't really like to call it the real world because I feel like it's not even the real world. The real world is that there are ways to do things and there are rules. And this is something that I'm frustrated with. I grew up poor, and I know not everybody grows up poor. If you have student loans, you might have grown up poor like me. I don't know if you grew up as poor, and I'm not trying to compete, but I grew up poor. And something that I realized later, it took me a lot of pain to figure this out, is that there were ways that things worked that I just simply didn't know. I didn't know how to navigate these things. And like many of your listeners who are going to become who are chiropractors or becoming chiropractors, and I know that it's something like 68% of all chiropractors are self-employed. And I don't think that many chiropractors or anyone that's self-employed understand all that comes with that, of oh crap, now you're your own boss. You've got to make your own schedule. You've got to pay your own taxes. You've got to do your own payroll. You've got to do your own bookkeeping. In many cases, you have to clean your own floors and pay your lease and get insurances. And like, when you start to work in this realm, there's like sharks everywhere too. There's people that will take advantage of you. There's misinformation. Generally free information is often the most expensive information you could get, because you don't know what their motivation to give you that free advice is. And in the student loan space, so much of the information that's provided online that you would get through Google from searching, which is what people do, is how people find information, is coming from interests that are interested in, and we're in a space now where people can understand that what we see online isn't often truth. It's not at least the whole truth. There might be partial truth in it, but there's interest groups that benefit. And in this case, the interest group that benefits from people having student debt are banks. Banks make money from refinancing federal student loan debt and converting them into private student loans. And there are times when it makes sense to convert a federal student loan into a private student loan. I would say from chiropractors that I've met, it's less than 1% that would make sense for them to take, even if they have a real high interest rate, even if they're at a 7% interest rate and they can get a 3.5% interest rate. And that doesn't make sense to people. And I know this is a roundabout way of me saying, welcome to this real world. Welcome to a, I guess, confusing, bureaucratic, systematized world where there are rules that aren't explained and ignorance is no excuse. And, that's the strange world that it is. And, I do believe in follow the money a lot of the times. And I go, well, why aren't the schools hiring us, to teach all of the students? Or why aren't the schools teaching, tax preparation and how to set up your corporation and how to manage your student debt and how to fill out these documents and how to follow up with servicer errors? Because the servicer errors, even though it's absurd, they do exist. Like whether we like that they exist or not. But I could understand that the schools have so many other things to worry about, and they're like, we don't even want to deal with this student loan monster. Like, people understand they've got student loans, they're gonna figure it out somehow. But the fact is that a lot of people don't figure it out, and they're kind of lost. And not just in student loans, they're the world keeps moving. The rent comes due, the mortgage comes due if you're lucky enough to qualify to purchase a home in this environment that we're in. The car payments come due, the childcare comes due, and then you add that starting a business and marketing and getting new clients and the competitors down the street, and it's a lot to keep up with. And I think that one of the benefits that we help people with is at least how to not worry about your damn student loans and your damn taxes and preparing for retirement. So how do we solve those elements? And then it comes down to like, how do they know they could trust us to be able to help them, that we're not one of the sharks in the water preying on them the same way as many other self-interested groups?
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to point out that you're not a group of chiropractors trying to do this. You have a team of people who are focused on these different areas: taxes, finances, investments, that are going to... We
have a team of financial advisors. We've got a student loan attorney with a licensed law practice that communicates with the loan servicers with limited power of attorney. So we're able to communicate with the loan servicers on the behalf of our clients. We are licensed and insured with errors and omissions and cyber insurance for $1 million per policy. I mean, we've been doing this for, almost 7 years now. Day in, day out. And this is all we look at. I mean, we're looking at student loan numbers and taxes and income documents and family structures and the constant changing platform of student debt. Things are looking better. I don't want to make this a doom and gloom call. As a matter of fact, if you understand how to, there's a saying that we say at Student Loan Tutor, when we go to conferences, we've gone to a bunch of chiropractic conferences. I've actually been hired as a keynote speaker for Chiro Congress, which is where all of the executive directors for the chiropractic associations go each year. And it ended up being Michael that spoke at that. But I was invited to go speak at that. And one of the sayings that we say is if you're forced to play the game, it pays to know the rules. And it's not that people even choose to play the game. Like, just by the very fact that we exist, we're playing this game. And, some people would say, well, don't go get student loans, because if you can't pay the loan back, then you shouldn't get them. Well, that's not how the game works. The game doesn't work like that. The game works is, if you want to succeed in life as an individual, statistically, you're going to have more success if you go to school and get an education, whether you could afford to pay the damn thing or not. And then once you have the debt, then the game changes. And it's not like, feel bad that you can't pay it back. I mean, that's what a lot of people do, is they're like, shit, I've got so much student debt. And then they just feel like crap, and they feel like a loser because they can't pay it back. And what they don't realize is that nobody's paying it back, or very few people are paying. There are people that pay their student loans back, but there's a lot of chiropractors, many of which are our clients, never going to pay this thing back. Then they're going to pay as little as possible. And one part of what we do, it kind of feels like psychotherapy, is making people feel okay about that. Most countries that are as developed, if I use quotations parenthetically here, that as developed as we are, provide free education. The fact that we not only have to pay for our education, we have to take loans out for it, and then we get charged interest on top of that, and then we don't get explained how the damn thing works. And we end up, there's clients that we have that owe 4 or 5 times what they used to owe. And there's nightmare situations where people were married and they mixed their loans, and then they got divorced, and the one won't talk to the other, and the other one's forced to pay, and they're garnishing their paychecks and garnishing their Social Security. I mean, I've seen so many things, and there's ways to tackle all these. They're all different. They're all different situations. And I don't know. I feel like I went on a rant here, Haley. Can you reel me back in? I feel like I'm out in this ocean in front of me.
It's education. I think it's educational for everyone to hear, and it's obvious that you're passionate about, so I love it.
I've heard so many people weep when they've understood the game. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, I'd play video games with my friends, and I feel like I wasn't as good at video games as, some kids, they just pick up the remote and they know where to go and do all that stuff. And I remember like the feeling I would get when I'd actually figure out how to play the game, or, when you're playing a game as a kid. And I see that happen with people with student loans, with taxes, and with finance and retirement. That all of a sudden there's something that clicks. Sometimes it's that first call. Sometimes it's, the first year. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 years down the road. And all of a sudden they're like, oh crap, I see how this whole damn thing works. Like, it's not as scary as what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the sad thing is, I feel like a lot of people, they're scared of it and they don't want to look at it, and there's shame associated. There's shame associated with debt. And it actually isn't a surprise. We talk about slavery and the history of slavery. One of the histories of slavery is something called debt peonage, where people were in debt, and then their debt equated to the fact that they were actually a lesser human being. And it was that's where the term peon came from, someone just being a peon. And built into what it means to be human is when we feel that we have a debt, especially a debt that we don't understand, that's constantly growing, we feel lessened by the increase of that debt. And I think an important part of this is, back to this initiatory process of like, hey, what does that even mean? How did I get here? What's everybody else doing about this? And how do I navigate this so number one, I feel okay, and I understand what the hell this means for me. So yeah,
yes,
that's mostly what I think the work that we do, so to speak.
And you were leaning most people towards income-based repayment. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the questions that people might have are, have you seen loans go away?
Yeah, go away, get forgiven, get erased. There's so many different terms that people use for this. It's a weird thing, like your debt just goes away. Or what is that? That's also unique to student loans, which makes it really confusing. It makes it challenging to listen to the Dave Ramseys and Susie Ormans of the world, where their advice might be really good with other debts. If it's a normal loan, a lower interest rate is always better. Paying it back fast is better. Pay back the interest rate that's the highest first. And for a lot of people, this appears to be their student loan, but their student loan has this magical disappearing element. So like, if it's going to disappear if magical fairies are going to come clean your house in the middle of the night, and you have a lot of work to do cleaning it if you're going to clean it yourself, and you have a whole bunch of other things like taking care of your kids and your practice and all those other things, like, do you really want to spend all of your day cleaning your house if magical fairies are going to come in the middle of the night? No, you're going to wait for the magical fairies. And generally with loans, there aren't magical fairies, except for student loans, where there is a forgiveness element, which is almost like magical fairies. I know it sounds absurd, but there's all sorts of weird stuff with student loans. There's ways to stop interest capitalization. And there's also ways for interest forgiveness to occur, where a percentage of what's called negative amortization of the interest, half of it, little fairies come every month and make it disappear. Now, I'm going to bring up, you said, do I recommend income-based repayment? And here's where we go down this weird pathway where it sounds like semantics, but it's not. Income-based repayment is actually one of 5, or technically 6, income-driven repayments. So there's multiple different income-driven repayments. There's income-based repayment, which is called IBR, which is what a lot of people are familiar with, which in many cases is not the best income-driven repayment. There's pay-as-you-earn. There's revised pay-as-you-earn. There's income-contingent repayment. And there's income-sensitive repayment. And there's IBR for new borrowers. 6 different income-driven repayments. And you go, what the heck? Why? Like, one of them's got to be better than the other, and it's just bureaucratic craziness. It's like at some point in 1998, they said, oh, crap, I think it was 97, actually. We need this new repayment thing because people are starting to default on their loans. We're going to create this thing called ICR. Oh, crap, it's 2007. We're going to do this thing called IBR. It's going to be 15% of your discretionary income instead of 20% of your discretionary income, but we're going to capitalize interest this way instead of that way because ICR seem to still cause people to, I guess I wanted to say all that to say it's complicated because it's bureaucrats and lawmakers and politicians trying to gain votes that come up with different programs. And you might go, well, why are there these programs at all? Like, why do these, I don't know, I'm like probably not even answering your question yet about the loan forgiveness, but why does loan forgiveness exist at all? And that's a debate among attorneys and among different people. Why does it exist? Like, why even offer it? You don't get loan forgiveness on your credit card. You don't get loan forgiveness on your mortgage. Throughout history, there's something called a debt jubilee, where if you couldn't pay a debt for a specific time, it would get forgiven. And that's the origins of student loan forgiveness. But why do I think, and what are some of the debates of why student loan forgiveness exists? I think it exists to keep people from being able to declare bankruptcy on their student debt. Because otherwise I could give you a different strategy. The strategy would be go to chiropractic college or any college, doesn't matter what college you go to, graduate, charge up all your credit cards, and then declare bankruptcy and get your loans forgiven. But if you've probably heard, and probably your listeners have heard, that it's very difficult to get student loans discharged. And the reason it's difficult is because this forgiveness element, the idea that your loans can get forgiven. They say, well, your payment's at $22 a month. Can you afford that? And they say, well, of course I could afford $22 a month. Okay, great. The loan stays. And so that's how people could declare bankruptcy. Their credit cards and all their other judgments and liens will get forgiven, not forgiven, discharged in bankruptcy. But their student loans will stay because of this element. So the question is, have people had their loans forgiveness? Yes. A lot of people that have public service student loan forgiveness, meaning they work 30 hours or more or full time for a 501c3 nonprofit or the government, and they also have direct loans, and they've been in income-driven repayment or standard 10-year repayment. I could even see as I'm looking at you, like, what is all this craziness? Then after 120 qualified payments, provided they weren't in forbearance during that time, unless they were in COVID forbearance, because those payments count, even though they're not payments, but they're called payments, then their loans will get forgiven. And there's no tax implication associated with people that work for 501c3 nonprofits, the government, to qualify for that thing. Now, there's also 2 million people that have had student loans long enough to qualify for income-driven student loan forgiveness, which means after 20 to 25 years, if you've made 20 to 25 years of qualified payments within an income-driven repayment plan, at the end of that 20 to 25 years, your loans get forgiven. And you might go, well, is it 20 or 25 years? Is it 22 years? Is it 23 years? Why 20 to 25? Well, depends on what plan you're in, and it depends on if they're graduate loans or undergrad loans. And if you have a single graduate loan, it taints the whole thing and makes it all 25 years, unless you took the loans out after a specific time and qualified for pay as you earn instead of IBR, in which case it does shrink down. So this stuff is not getting taught in school. And if you call the loan servicer, because people go, well, shit, I'm going to call the loan servicer and ask questions, which normally would work, except I feel bad for the loan servicers. It's not that they're bad people. They're managing 49 million borrowers. And these are companies that have government contracts that don't pay much. And they're taught for a day or maybe a couple days on all of these different things. And they're never going to speak with you again. And they might only work there for a month. And they get paid $10 to $12 an hour. And that's who we're taking our financial advice from, which is crazy. Like if you think about that for even a moment, you go, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. I'm getting my financial advice from someone I'm never going to talk to again, that has no accountability or license to give me any financial advice, has no insurance to back up if they screw up, has a 61% error rate, and probably doesn't even know what they're telling me. It's probably not a good idea. So to answer that question, has anybody had their loans forgiven in income-driven repayment? There's about 2 million people, approximately. The Consumer Law report put out exactly the number. They had the exact number. It was something around 2 million. And this was last year that they announced this. It's unbelievable. So I hope everybody's sitting on the edge of their seat. At least for me, it's unbelievable. It should be unbelievable for everybody. Everybody should be out rioting in the streets again just because of this. So out of 2 million people, approximately, that would qualify for student loan forgiveness, had they been in an income-driven repayment plan and with the rec loans and constantly done it for the qualified time, because they've had loans for that amount of time. There's been 2 million that should have qualified. There's been, wait for it, how many people do you think actually got their loans forgiven at that end of that term?
5.
It's unbelievable. It's not quite that bad. 36. But that is crazy. Yeah. 36 people out of 2 million. And don't take my word for it. Look up, I think it's on National Consumer Law Center that put that statistic, that's put out the statistic. I forget her name. She's an attorney, Petra. I forget her last name, Petra Jung or something. But these are crazy numbers. And what does that mean that only 36 people got their loans? Does that mean that student loan forgiveness doesn't exist? Because you hear that a lot from people. Student loan forgiveness doesn't exist. Well, no, it does exist, but you have to do everything right. It's like writing for a grant, frankly. And that's a challenge if there's no playbook. And for the most part, people have no playbook. I mean, it's not even that we're guessing whether they have a playbook or not. The very fact that only 36 people that could have, out of 2 million people, only 36 people qualified, I think that most of those 36 people, they also didn't know what the hell they were doing. They just happened to check the right boxes and do it in the right time. And that 61% error rate fell in their favor with the loan servicer. And just randomly, it's like, they got through, that whole system. And Biden's administration has done some things to give public service loan forgiveness to people that normally wouldn't qualify for it, because that has also happened. Matter of fact, I have a person who wrote me. It was one of my most challenging clients, and she wrote me. I can't even find it, but she wrote me recently that all of her loans just got forgiven because we've been managing all of her stuff. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And she said, you probably could hear me screaming for joy. I was literally weeping. And I want to send you something to you and Amy, who's been managing my account. You guys saved my life. Like we hear these stories, and it sounds absurd to hear this in the financial world, but people are burdened with debt, and it's being like liberated. It's akin to being freed from modern slavery. Granted, it's not the same as slavery was before, but it's modern version of slavery. The feeling of having that pressure of debt and feeling like, man, I just owe on everything. And to have something of that just be lifted or just disappear feels like magic, frankly. And I am grateful that these programs exist. More people should know how to navigate them. There should be more people trained. There should be licensing bodies that license people like us to be able to help people, because the fact is that people don't have an advocate because there's not a financial interest. We're a paid for service. So people pay us, out of their own pocket for us to do this. And the only reason people would pay us is if we're going to save them money. Like basically they're paying us with money they would be normally throwing towards the government, a very small fraction of what they would normally put to that end. But frankly, I don't feel that should be everybody's responsibility because, there's so many damn people with student loans. Somebody should be educating them. But who's going to do it?
Exactly.
Instead it's happening on a small podcast, and from a laptop here in Hawaii. But I guess that's how things happen these days. That's how the freedom train runs.
Well, we're getting the message out. So can you tell us a little bit about the changes with COVID or kind of what some updates are that have been recently going on?
Yeah, I could totally tell you all about that. It's been a wild roller coaster, and I've seen online people jumping to speculations, which makes things really confusing when it's like, oh, this is what it is. Oh, actually, no, this is what it is. And, people don't correct, the pundits don't correct what they've said. We've been really careful with emailing all of our clients. We only email our clients what the heck's going on when we're 100% sure we know what the heck's going on. And I don't even know if the administration knows what's going on most of the time. Currently, the forbearance is going until May 1st. So that means as long as you have direct loans, not FEAL loans. FEAL loan stands for Federal Family Education Loan, which is a type of loan that people were getting prior to direct loans coming out in 2007. People with direct loans are automatically put into a forbearance. And at first we thought, oh crap, this is terrible, because if they're put in the forbearance, typically when you're in forbearance, those lack of payments don't qualify towards your forgiveness window. So you have to pay for that 20 or 25 years. When you're in forbearance, normally that doesn't go towards the forgiveness time. In this case, they made an exception. They said, you're going to go into this forbearance, and all of this forbearance time is going to go towards loan forgiveness. The other good news is that they dropped the interest rate to 0, and they stopped interest capitalization, which is also extremely powerful. So essentially, everybody is in what we call in our business a 0% interest, qualified income-driven repayment forbearance right now, which is great, which means that since COVID started, there's at least been one good thing for anyone that has direct loans, and that means that you're on the right track. You could have been screwing up everything before then, but now you have 2 years almost worth of qualified payments at this moment in time towards loan forgiveness. So whether that's 20 years or whether that's 25 years, you have 2 years that you've qualified for it, and the government did our job for you. So that's great. The challenge, what I worry about is going to happen, I'm almost certain it's going to happen, is come May, the payments are going to become due. People are going to be used to not paying the damn student loan debt because they haven't been paying it. And they're going to get posed with an option. They're going to get, would you like to extend your forbearance? And they're going to, basically what they're going to hear is, do you want more of what just happened? And people are going to say, yeah, I want more relief. That I don't want to deal with that. And what's going to happen in that very moment in time is if they were in income-driven repayment, all their interest that hadn't capitalized, which means hadn't become part of the principal, which means isn't accruing interest on top of itself, which is how interest compounds and balloons. All of that interest for years prior to the forbearance is going to go capitalize and become part of the principal. And then instead of it being 0% interest, it's going to be at whatever it is, 6.8, or depends on when you got the damn loan, how much interest you're paying. That's going to start accumulating. And then from that moment on, all of those forbearance months and years, which turns into years, doesn't qualify towards loan forgiveness. So I'm pretty sure that's going to happen to most people, is they're going to get presented with a forbearance rather than, hey, we're going to look at all your income documents and your family size and pick the right income-driven repayment and come up with a strategy and do some, it's just, that's not going to happen with 49 million borrowers. And there's no accountability or anything on the servicer for not doing that. There's some news like Navient recently, which used to be Sallie Mae, is settling a whole bunch of student loans because they were putting people in forbearance instead of putting them in income-driven repayment. when it was clear that the person was wanting to go into income-driven repayment. They're paying out a couple $100s to every borrower that they did that to. But ultimately, that doesn't solve the major big issue. But I see it all the time. Haley, I see people all the time. I would say virtually 100% of the people, I could point back to their loan history and go, right there, this is what happened, and that cost you $20,000 in interest. Virtually everyone, I could point out a situation like that. And the only reason people aren't out in the streets picketing and rioting and whatever is because they just simply don't understand it. If they did, they would be freaking out. And long way for me to answer, what is COVID? You got loan forgiveness during this time if you had direct loans. If you don't have direct loans, well, you're at the end of this window. You might want to do there's an equation that needs to happen to see if it makes sense to switch from non-direct loans, whether that's Perkins loans or FIA loans, over to direct loans. The minute you do that switch, you lose whatever forgiveness you've already accrued over here, which a lot of people don't know. So they're like, oh, direct loans, I get a lower payment. But then they don't realize they just gave up 12 years of loan forgiveness, which you have to equate that. Sometimes it makes sense to give up 7-8 years worth of loan forgiveness and start over just to get a lower payment and slow the interest accrual. But that's a complex calculation. And I promise you, people that are answering the phone for $12 an hour with a day of training are not doing that. It's impossible. No one's doing that. No borrower's doing that. Like all these smart attorneys and stuff, they're not doing it with their own loans. Pretty much most everybody's getting screwed to one degree or another, unfortunately, because it's a complicated system that's set up for someone to get screwed or someone to take advantage of it. And, it's like the tax system. I remember our former president prior to now said that he doesn't pay taxes because he's smart. And there's a lot of business people and entrepreneurs that pay very little in taxes. Matter of fact, many people get subsidies. Not only do they not pay taxes as, very, very wealthy business entrepreneurs, as they get subsidies from the city and the counties to keep their businesses where they are. And as long as they could expense out, the way that the system works is you pay taxes on what you keep. You don't pay taxes on what you own that you're not actually extracting. So if you could keep the money moving, you could keep making money. It's the way the system works, whether we like it or not. And it's good to know how to navigate it because we're forced to play that game. I mean, we complain all we want. But.
When we graduated, I can tell you that our accountant didn't know anything about it. Our financial advisor didn't know anything about it. And they probably still don't. So
they don't.
It's nice to have an advocate fighting for you and that knows what's going on.
What's crazy is how complicated it is, Haley, it's actually more complicated than most other areas of finance. So you mix that with the fact it doesn't pay much. And then you get financial advisors could make way more money financially advising than helping you navigate the student loan system, as well as have to be on the phone with servicers and dealing with that nightmare, getting thrown in. There's a lot of companies that scam people. I mean, that's frankly something that, it's like, what is it? Extended car warranties and student loans are the like two major calls I get. I don't have student loans and I don't have a car under warranty. So, but I still get calls. And the challenge is that wherever there's a lot of people in need, it's going to attract predators. It's like throwing chum in the water. Wherever you throw chum, there's going to be predators there. And the challenge is that student loan borrowers in a way are chum. They're in a desperate situation. They don't know who to turn to. They're not getting good advice anywhere. So, an expert, definition of an expert is someone that seemingly knows more than you. The challenge is that they might not know more than you.
Yeah.
And they might just have a shtick. And, it's how do you figure out who to trust in this world that we're in? And thankfully there's things like reviews and Better Business Bureau and licensing boards and, and things like that in many cases. So that's kind of what we've got to lean on in these times. But it doesn't surprise me that it would actually really surprise me if you had a financial advisor or a CPA or a tax advisor that understood student loans. They should learn it, but there's really, to their own credit, it's not really easy to learn. Like you can't go get a certification really in it. So people don't, and even if you did, there's so much nuance. There's so many things that in theory should work a specific way, the way that the laws are written, and then the servicers just don't abide by it. And because they're an extension of the government, they don't have to abide by the same collection practices as a normal company would. They get to basically hide underneath the government protocols, and occasionally they really screw up like Navient did, and they are forced to, come clean, so to speak. But in many cases, they just do a really poor job. And I don't know if I could really blame them. I don't know if I don't know the owners of these companies, and I don't know the staff. But I think the staff is probably people just like you and me, but overworked and underpaid, and overwhelmed.
So I have a question from the audience that I got.
Oh, great.
Through. So you kind of touched on this, but I'm going to let you dive a little bit deeper. But couples who graduate with double debt, combine them or not?
No, never combine your debt. It's not romantic. There's no benefit to it. And this is something that I see happen, and it's a nightmare. And I think I touched on a little bit earlier in this podcast recording is there used to be a single box you could check to do that. And the minute you do it, basically what you did is you signed a guarantee. Both people signed a guarantee on both, and the only one that benefits is the government, because now both of you are responsible for both of your debts, and there's no other benefit at all. None, zero. So don't do it. And if you've done it, keep your spouse or ex-spouse on very friendly terms, because they could really mess you up. They could just say, I'm not paying this debt at all. And now your credit's screwed unless you pay their debt for them, because you're equally responsible. And I see it happen all the time.
Yeah, I think you want to have, they think, we're in this together.
Yeah.
We're going to be together. We're going to work on it together. But you have to think of the reality of it is there's no benefit to it. No
benefit. And that's what's sad, is that I feel like a lot of these things, I think it's getting better, but I feel like a lot of these things have been set up to really prey on people's kindness and compassion and earnestness. Like a lot of things, and something that comes up, people have a hard time understanding where I lean politically, because I'll say things that sound conservative and things that sound liberal, and I don't even know where the heck I lean politically these days. But people generally have a feeling of, I want to pay back my debt. I went to school, I got an education, and I'm going to pay this damn thing. And what they run into is like, man, this is way harder than I thought to pay it back. And all of a sudden they run into this problem of like, gosh, I'm always giving crap to people that don't pay their debts because they're a deadbeat or whatever. And like, I'm all of a sudden in that in that situation, and it creates a little bit of cognitive dissonance. And I feel like a lot of the industry, I guess you would call it, really preys on people's, kindness and desire to do good. I mean, we have a desire to pay back our debt. When we feel indebted to somebody, we feel like we owe them a gift of some kind. The challenge is that in a lot of cases, we've been, I'm going to just say it, we've been overcharged for school. I have a hard time saying it. I mean, if I spoke at more schools, maybe I'd bite my lip a little bit on this, but they don't bring us in to speak. They talk about doing it all the time. And there's some schools that have brought us in to speak, but I offer to speak for free and advise people for free and tell people exactly which plans to go in right from their school. And this, you would wonder why would a school not want a company who has helped more people than anyone, and exactly those people. And the only thing I could think of is they're like, ooh, we've put them in a lot of debt. We don't really want to talk about that debt. And it's also, I'm going to say really unpopular things like, you're not going to make enough money to pay back this debt in a way that makes sense for most people. And if you do, that's a whole nother thing. But man, you're going to really, really have to make a lot of money and not be able to move it anywhere else. Because that's the cool thing. If you're self-employed, one of the benefits of being self-employed and managing student debt is that you could control to a large degree how much money you earn. And if you control how much money you earn, you could control how you document your money so that you could affect what you're paying with income-driven repayment. I mean, we have clients that their practices do $400,000, $500,000 a year, and they qualify for a $0 payment. And you go, wait a second, if you're making $400,000 a year, you're going to pay all your debt back in like 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. But that's what the practice brings in. Now, where does the money go after when it comes into the practice? Only a small percentage of it actually goes to the actual borrower. And how that money goes to the borrower determines how much money you're going to pay towards your student debt. And again, normally you'd want to pay your student debt back. You want to pay every loan back that has an interest rate, unless magical fairies come and make it disappear, which is what happens with student loans.
Okay, so then I have a question. Do you help people who want to pay them off? I mean, is there ever an occasion where you're like
psychological support of like
well, they come to you.
Kidding. I'm kidding.
I'm guessing that there is a small percentage.
There are.
They come to you, they start on income driven or one of the plans, and that they start making so much money that maybe it makes sense to pay it off.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And that's an important decision. It's important to make the decision based on math. And you would think everyone is making all their financial decisions based on math, and they're not. They're making it based on emotion, based on fear, avoidance. Avoidance is a big one. People tend to keep doing what they're doing because they're like, last time I went and did something different, it was painful. I'm not going to go do something different. So every year we do, we submit new income documentation. We look at the taxes, the income, family size, what programs have come out. We look at what's happened with the payments and the interest over the past year. And if somebody's income has dramatically increased and it looks like it's going to continue to go that way, and they start getting this point where they're not qualifying for reduced income driven repayment plans, at that point in time, a private loan makes sense. We have to look and we have to say, well, I mean, it's super rare. I mean, I'm talking like in this below 1% of our clients end up doing this. I'm talking, this is even among medical doctors and nurses and everybody, but it does happen. And when this happens, then it becomes real Dave Ramsey easy. Then it becomes, what's the lowest damn interest rate you could get? And like, let's make sure that part of the loan stipulation is that the loan dies with the borrower. So that means that it's not attached to my estate, which is important. And a lot of people don't know that. They think if they die, and they have $300,000 in loans, that their kids inherit their debt. That doesn't happen with federal student loans, but it can happen with private student loans or private loans. So these are important elements. And again, another reason you want to talk with a professional, because you could screw up one little thing. And I'm sure you've heard stories like this, Haley, and a lot of people have. Someone screws up one little thing, for example, checking a little box that me and my spouse are going to do this, and it transforms their entire life. It changes where your kids could go to school because what you could afford, because you're paying your spouse's student debt. I mean, this is real life consequences from something so arbitrary and stupid as a little box on a thing. It seems like, oh yeah, I'm just clicking and bam, Well, what's really screwed up is you could do all the buttons right. You could press all the buttons right. You could read all the things, and the servicer could screw up, which is a 61% chance that they will. And at that moment, I get to quote that number because this is what was shown. It's unbelievable. I mean, I knew that. As a matter of fact, I thought it wasn't quite that bad, but the chances are is something's going to happen. And then it gets really scary to think about that, I guess. That's why people don't, is because you're thinking about that and you're like, well, what about, I mean, does my doctor screw up at what percentage does my doctor screw up at? Your doctor, thank goodness, probably has malpractice insurance. So if they screw up, there's some accountability present. But with the loan servicers currently, there's none.
What if you check the married, like combine them, and one of the half of the couple qualifies for PSLF?
That is an interesting question. Theoretically, it should qualify to get your loans forgiven. We've actually been dealing with one of these situations right now, and I'm going to have to get back to you on how that works.
Follow-up.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with that one. We're actually dealing with a client with that exact situation right now, because technically one of the people that is responsible for the debt doesn't work for a 501c3 nonprofit.
Yeah.
So does the one person that does qualify? There's a couple strange things like that. There was a shift that did happen. I can tell you a good news shift. And there's something important that I clarified with you, Haley, prior to the Zoom meeting, is that I'm the founder of the company, I'm the owner of the company, but I'm not active CEO, and I'm not actively working with borrowers these days. So as things change, I have a general overview of a lot of the elements, but some of the very nuanced specifics, my team is light years beyond me, which is great. It's humbling because at one point I knew more about this than anyone on the team. But now we have relationships with the top student loan attorneys in the country, people that now work for ed, my mind just went blank, for ed, which is the Department of Education. Yeah, you would think it's DOE, Department of Education, but it's actually ed, ED. But it's the acronym throws you off. But the good news is now people could work not full time for a PSLF, and as long as the accumulation of 30 hours a week come into play, they do qualify for loan forgiveness. So PSLF is getting more attractive. It's getting more fair. The Department of Education is making exceptions to people screwing up, because it used to be you made payments for 10 years. I'll give you some stories. I know these people personally. I made payments for 10 years. I was about to retire. I'm in my 60s, right? My clients in their 60s. I'm about to retire. They've been paying for 10 years. And then they find out, they had field loans because they've been a teacher for a long time, and those payments don't qualify for PSLF forgiveness. So sorry, I know you thought you were going to retire and that $140,000 of student loans were going to get forgiven, but no, they're not. And if you retire now, we're going to take 15, 20% of your discretionary income. And they're like, wait, I planned my retirement based on PSLF. Yeah. Sorry, you were in the wrong loan program. It's like, nobody told me. Well, that's not our problem, But Bob over at FedLoan, he said that I was fine. Who's Bob? Bob, I don't know. I wrote his name down. It's Bob. We don't even know Bob.
Day of training, Bob did.
Yeah. And there's no accountability. And there's horror stories like this. It's not uncommon. It's actually very, very common. I would go as far as to say most people that think that they have a certain period of loan forgiveness actually have a lot less than what they think that they have, for various reasons.
Okay. I have another question that was submitted to me. Do you have a public, like a calculator on your website of some
Great question. We just built a calculator. We actually have a proprietary calculator that I don't see anywhere else that calculates negative AM forgiveness, that doesn't increase. If you go to the government calculator, it assumes an increase in income over time, which if you're self-employed, you don't necessarily have to have that increase of income. So the short answer is we have a calculator. We have one on our website that we could calculate. It's embarrassing that I don't know if we have that live right now. We have a calculator that our team uses, and if somebody wanted to run calculations, they could call Student Loan Tutor and we would run it specifically for them, which is beneficial because it shows all the different programs and which everyone would be. But I know our goal is to have a calculator that everyone could access that actually calculates it.
What you guys provide is so much more in depth than like a calculator could do. I mean,
way more. If anyone that's listening
that
this
question, you need look for more help than that. I think a calculator can only provide so much information, and so I think that
it could only provide what you put into it, and probably what you're not thinking to put into it because you just simply don't know that you didn't put that in is making a big difference. And when you have over $100,000 of student debt, and many chiropractors are over $200,000, the difference of these little things is huge. It's like, I remember hearing this metaphor at a Tony Robbins seminar once. When you're golfing and you hit the golf ball, what is the difference of where that golf ball ends up when the golf club is 2 millimeters one way or the other? Right in the beginning, if you're off by a millimeter or 2 millimeters, the golf club is off by that angle. If you look at like a foot or 2 foot ahead of that golf club, it looks like it's fine and it's going to go right in the right direction. But that millimeter or 2 millimeters, when you go over a long distance, I mean, you're off in you're like missed completely and you lose the game. And when you have hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, it's like you want someone that knows where to aim the damn golf club right, because in the beginning it could look like you're doing it fine and the consequences are very small, but it grows and it accumulates. It creates a nightmare. Ideally, our clients, I mean, your listeners are the ideal client for us, but often not who we have. Most of our clients are people that have been paying for 8 years, 10 years. They get into some weird thing with the servicer and go like, crap, what the hell is going on? I've got to find something. They talk to someone and someone says, call Student Loan Tutor, because we can't even really advertise. Like all of our growth is organic and by referral, which should say something about our company. But why can't we advertise? Because you can't talk about student loans on Facebook. You can't talk about student loans on Instagram. They just won't allow it. It's like it's like talking about COVID. You just can't do it. It doesn't matter. Like they just say their algorithm. It's not a person. An algorithm says you just said student loan. Can't advertise. So yeah, get help if you have that question. If doing a advanced calculation is something that would change how you manage things, work with a professional. There's times it makes sense to work with a professional, and those are the times.
Well, no one benefits from your services other than the person paying for them, right? You're not.
Yeah.
You're not benefiting the federal loans or the government in any way, or
no. I always kind of worry that someone's going to like show up and be like, "You're saving people way too much money. like, what are you doing?" I jokingly have said, it's like I'm a federal bank robber for our clients. You know, it's like, here you go. Here's your money that you normally were going to put there. No, the only person we benefit is our client, and our client pays us a fee for service. So every client will look at, hey, this is what we're going to save you. Here's our flat fee for service. This is what we charge. There's no contracts or anything. Most of our clients, over 90% of them, use our services every year. And most of our clients use us.
Fee, right?
Yeah, because we do paperwork. We're forced to do paperwork every single year with this service. Yep. So we charge an annual fee, and it covers everything. Like if someone's going to go get a mortgage or trying to buy a house, they need to submit loan documents, or they're going to take out more loans, or they're trying to look at refinancing their loan to a private loan, and what's the best bank to do that with. We don't take any commissions from any banks, so no banks are paying us. We're not getting paid. Literally, the only money we make as a company is the money that our clients give us out of their own hard-earned pocket.
Okay, my last question, I think some people worry about this too, is when the loans are forgiven, is a tax component to that. Does everyone owe that money? How does that work?
That's a great question. I'll start with this. Biden, during his first 4 years in office, got rid of, for the borrowers that are qualifying for the forgiveness in this period of his office, are not going to have the tax implication. So they want a Biden lottery in a way. But that has not changed the law, which means that after him, it could be anything. And typically how it works, or how the law is written, and what everyone prior to COVID and Biden had to deal with, is that whenever the loan gets forgiven, the entire loan balance. And the reason he's doing it is because of COVID, because he probably won't get reelected if he hits a whole bunch of borrowers with, you just had $300,000 of loans forgiven. And you might say, wait, I didn't borrow $300,000, but you don't get the amount of the forgiven amount isn't just what you borrowed. It's not what you borrowed. It's your entire balance. It's the principal plus accumulated capitalized interest over time. So you might have borrowed $100,000 and you might have $400,000 of loans forgiven at the end of the term. So I'm going to answer this in a little longer way. This is a reason why keeping your interest from accruing matters. Because some people are like, well, my loans are going to get forgiven. I don't care how much interest accrues. Well, you do care, because the interest that accrues is going to get forgiven. And you're not going to have to pay all of that interest. You're going to have to pay taxes on that interest. But that's a big tax bracket, because if you're used to making $70,000 a year, you're in one tax bracket. This year, you just made $70,000 plus $400,000 that just got forgiven that you really didn't make, but you did because of magical fairies. You made it, but didn't, So now you got $470,000. Now you're in a, close to a 50% tax bracket. So that would be treated as earned income, and it would come to you as what on your taxes as what's called a 1099-C, and that would come to you as earned income, and you'd have to pay taxes on it, which is something, again, why people should they should have a plan, and financial advisors should also learn this and help advise people, because that's a very real thing that has happened to every borrower up to Biden COVID time, and is still in the law to continue happening, and likely will. So yeah, you need a plan for saving for the tax implication, which is why holistic finance birthed out of Student Loan Tutor. Is it looked at taxes, it looked at tax strategy, it looked at planning for that exact event. How do I plan for that? It's essentially like a mortgage balloon payment on your student loans. How do I plan for that? Because that could just destroy somebody. I mean, you could declare bankruptcy. These are some options that could happen, because you could bankrupt on IRS tax debt, potentially. I can't give legal advice. It is owed, and it makes sense to have a plan. And I know you were talking about you have a plan for this exact thing. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Is there anything you feel like you need to add to the conversation, or?
Yeah, I think what's so important, all the details of how to do this and how to navigate it and how the game works and how, if it's screwed up and if it's not screwed up, and all of that, I don't find matters so much. That part is all fair and well, and people could figure out whether we're a great company to work with and get help with, and people could figure out all that. I think what's most important for your listeners, anyone listening to this, to understand is to feel okay with the fact that they had to get a bunch of debt in order to have a profession. That's the world we live in. And it's also okay to learn how to navigate these systems so that you don't get totally screwed. Because I feel like a lot of people feel guilt on both ends of the spectrum. And I think that that's built in, is implicit, as they say, into the system, and into what it means to be human. We want to pay our debts, but this isn't a debt that we really agreed to in a way. In order to live the life that we're sold from birth, pretty much, we realize we have to go to college and get a degree and do all that stuff. So, and if we don't do it, we know the consequences are, we're really going to struggle in life. So we kind of got put on this path, and being that we're here, we have the debt, work through what it takes to feel okay with the fact you have the debt. And also, I'd say work through what it means to be okay to take advantage of systems that are in place for your own benefit. You might go, well, what if everybody did that? The whole system would collapse. Well, I don't know. Maybe so, but I think that the system needs to shift. There's so many people, almost nobody's paying this damn thing back. And a lot of people feel a lot of guilt and shame around it. And I think if people could feel even a little bit less guilt and shame around their student debt, and that's all that got accomplished on this podcast recording, it would really have a huge impact on their life. I've seen it happen. I've seen people go like, gosh, I just don't feel so bad about this. And that probably is one of the most profound changes. People end up having children that normally wouldn't have. I've had many clients buy houses when they thought they couldn't afford them prior to that. I've had people go into practice for themselves because it made more sense. They actually paid less on their student loans and made more money by going into practice for themselves rather than work for another person. I've had people go back to practicing chiropractic when they had stopped because they're like, shit, I need to make more money, and I don't know how to deal with this debt while building my practice. Like, it's a quagmire. And it's like, these are smart people. They have doctorates, that they just never heard it explained in this way. And they're like, oh, wait, whoa, oh, that totally makes sense. And you just that aha moment. Yeah, I think that's what I'd end with. And magical fairies. Magical fairies will fix your loans.
It's a whole paradigm shift. And I think that anyone who's on the fence should take a minute and reach out and look at the other way. And like you said, there's no contract with you guys.
No, and we're like the opposite of a hard sell of any kind. We have all 5-star reviews. I mean, I don't even know. I don't think that there's another financial company that has all 5-star reviews everywhere you go. I mean, I think we have like a 4.9 because someone was like, I don't give 5-star reviews, but they're amazing. 4 stars, like. So, and then there's one person's like, can someone call me back? No one's calling me back, and gave us a 1 star. And then we called them back and they don't know how to log in to change it, but yeah, I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of, I mean, if we're assholes, we're really, really good at PR or something because people really love to work with us. We're not going to pressure anybody that calls us. You can call us and get get advice and get help. If we can't help you, we won't charge you anything for the time. But almost always we could help everyone. And we have a policy where, like, if people aren't happy with our services, we'll give them their money back. It happens basically never.
Yeah.
So our whole goal is that people's lives should be better because they found us, and the services we do should be such a no-brainer that it literally pays for itself. Like, it should be, oh my gosh, I totally can't wait to give you my credit card number so that I could not pay a whole crap ton of money over here. Like, can't wait for that to happen. It's one of those really unique things where it's like, I feel like we're selling it's like someone's trading in their, old broken down whatever car for a brand new Tesla. And then at the same time, they're getting a whole bunch of money back. It's like, here's a Tesla and it self-drives it. You don't even have to drive it anymore. And here's some extra money. Merry Christmas. I feel like kind of that's what we do. So yeah, I feel like everyone should call us, frankly, because if we can't help them, they'll know. And if we can, then we'll give them the Tesla and throw a bunch of money in their hands and send them on their way. And magical fairies will come and get rid of their student loans at some point.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, you're welcome.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please share it with your friends on Instagram and Facebook. And for those of you who are already subscribers, we really appreciate it. Thanks for the reviews. We love reading those and knowing that you're loving the podcast. If you're looking for more tips and inspiration, be sure to check us out at lifestylepracticebuilders.com or join our business and marketing Facebook group for chiropractors at facebook.com/group/lifestylepractice.